Welcome to the panel where bootstrapped founders discuss the realities of building better products and a better life. I'm Justin Jackson, co-founder of Transistor.fm.
And I'm Brian Castle. I am in the process of launching Instrumental Components.
And once again, it's just Brian and I. And this is episode 10, so I thought it would be good for Brian and I to have a little check-in. We didn't pre-plan what we're going to say here.
No.
Have a little check-in on how we're feeling about the podcast, how we're feeling about the format.
You know, I feel like almost I've been involved in several podcasts, not a ton of them, but everyone goes through a lot of iteration in the earliest episodes. Like,
yeah.
I mean, Bootstrapped, like my last podcast, which I was on for like over 10 years, Bootstrapped Web, it was just me for the first like 14 episodes. And then Jordan joined around episode 15. And then even then, like we changed it up a bunch over the years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, how are we thinking about this? Like this one still feels very young and very like we're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Here's just a bunch of thoughts off the top of my head. And part of this, I think, is that, you know, my own curiosity kind of expands and contracts, right? So I think originally I was like, oh, I really love this idea of a panel of people. There's all these interesting people I wanted to talk to and catch up with. Like, you know, Matt Wensing had just moved on from Summit. And we were kind of in this mode of everyone was kind of, there was just lots in the air.
A lot of change.
A lot of change, a lot of topics. And I knew that, because I've done lots of podcasts with guests, I knew that getting guests every episode would be challenging.
I know. I should have like, because I've run into that same challenge before too, and I should have seen that coming. That like, that is so much work.
It's hard enough to get two people on the same show. Here's my grand universal theory about podcasts. The best show format for most podcasts is two co-hosts who just do the show regularly. And
I think I agree.
I know a lot of people like interview podcasts. The idea of a panel podcast is still interesting to me. It's just the actual scheduling piece is so tricky.
It is. There's so many. Yeah. Okay. So I first of all, I agree with you. And even for those podcasts that are like two guests or two co-hosts plus a guest, it's still like the co-hosts that are the most interesting part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think,
you know,
also I've struggled with as the show has gone on, I'm realizing that now there's still people I want to talk to. Like I messaged a bunch of people today and I said, hey, do you want to jump on last minute? And, you know, there's some folks that I think, well, actually there's one fellow that booked for our June 18th episode that I think will be super interesting. But the other thing about the panel format that's been tricky is that it's hard for it to not to devolve into the two of us interviewing one or two people at the same time. And there's just, for myself, there's a lot of things I want to talk about from my own life.
Dude, same thing. Like, you know, there are so many. Okay, I think we're on the same page on everything, but like just guests in general, like any podcast, if you plan to do guest interviews, the first thing that's challenging about that is even if you have a process, or even if you have like a team who's like handling the booking for you, one of the challenging things is that if you don't know the people who are coming on your podcast, like personally, if you're not friends with them, or if you don't follow their history and everything, then interviewing like a stranger, somebody who's totally new to you, it requires, I got to get up to speed on this person before I go on air. And that means like extra time. And look, we're just lazy. We don't want to be doing that. and it's not that I love meeting new people, especially at conferences and like on the internet and everything. And there are so many incredible, awesome people doing awesome things that I don't know about yet. But one of the things but on the flip side, one of the things that I really, really miss about the years of doing Bootstrapped Web with Jordan was that we had no guests.
Yeah.
We had no obligations, no tasks to do in between recordings. We literally just had a calendar appointment and we showed up and that was it. So I think our thought when we started the panel was like, let's just invite our friends on. We already know what they're about. We can just invite them on whenever. So we don't need to do that background research. We just know what they're up to, naturally, which is true. So then I think part of our thought with the panel was like, let's just, wrangle in our friends like last minute. We'll keep it super casual, see who's around every time and there is some value to that, right? Because it's like, okay, what's on our mind this week? Who can we get to come on the show this week and talk about that thing?
Yeah.
That's great in theory, but then when even just doing it like every 2 weeks, it's hard to keep having that like serendipity happen every time.
That's right. Yeah. And I know last episode we said, hey, if you're listening to this, reach out, and we did have some people reach out. Again, I think what's tricky is that for me to be excited about showing up, there has to be some sort of zeitgeist going on. And so, like, when Adam Wathan messages me and says, hey, bud, like, I've got tons of shared history with him, and if he's going through something and he wants to be on the hot seat, then, I've almost liked those hot seat episodes more. Like, maybe we should have called this podcast The Hot Seat. Yeah. But because
we're going to have to start, like, what we'll call it, like, de-paneling.
D-panel or D-panel. That's not a bad name.
And then this morning we were chatting about this a little bit, and like my mind starts to think about like, okay, this is a process problem. How do we how do we make this easier and streamline it? And still I don't know what the answer is, but like one thought was maybe we keep the list of potential guests more limited to just a group of friends that we already know. And it's sort of just a very closely like rotating panel. And then even then there's the scheduling issue. So I don't know, then we need like a spreadsheet or something. We still got to do like advance notice with people. But what you were saying earlier, the other thing that I sort of miss is, and what I've liked about these recent episodes is just the opportunity to get on the mics and talk about what's happening in your business and my business. And what's it, not even just, I do enjoy the traditional like bootstrapper podcast where it's like updates of behind the scenes, what we're working on. Yeah. But I think we could also expand that out to still cover all the other topics that we've been planning on covering. It doesn't necessarily have to be about what's happening in our business this week. Yes. It could just be our takes on all different, I really do love what Ian and Aaron have been doing with Mostly Technical. They really cover a wide range of topics. We don't have to necessarily be like them, like the Seinfeld of podcasts. But I just like the range, getting into different stuff. Yeah.
So I think this episode, we should do another update episode, and then whoever's listening, you can let us know what you've thought about these last 3 episodes. And we might listen to you or we might not, because what the listener cares about is important. But the biggest thing I think I've learned, and I think this has been a running theme on our show so far, is there has to be some passion and some interest and some curiosity. And so am I super excited about interviewing some people I don't really know on a podcast? Not really. And that's nothing against, people who are starting out or whatever. It's just like, it's just hard for me to, that that doesn't get me out of bed in the morning. You know,
That's
it's
exactly right. Like we were talking about this today and yesterday as we were trying to figure out like last minute who's going to be our guest for today, right? And the way my mind was going like this, like, okay, there are probably like one or two topics that I think are top of mind for me, and I think for you, like for you, like one thing that you started to bring up last time was maybe like YouTube taking over podcasting.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we should get into.
Yeah.
So and that's also sort of on my mind at the moment too.
Yeah.
And then like on my side, I'm also really fascinated still with AI and where this is going and what it means for the way that we work and everything like that.
Yes.
So these are like two big meaty topics that we should spend a whole episode talking about. So then my mind was like, okay, so then if we're going to bring on a guest, like who would be a good fit for that kind of conversation?
Yeah.
And then it's like, if we end up with someone who we just don't know, and now we need to spend our episode like kind of learning about their business and then we're just not even covering what we actually want to talk about.
You know what might be an interesting tweak to this format would be the show is still called The Panel. It's primarily you and I, but we do it live, and whoever shows up and watches the whole thing is on the panel. And then at the end, we ask the panel if there's anything that they want to bring up. Because there's always like
that's interesting.
Like burning desires or burning, not desires. Chris, cut that. There's always burning, like,
keep it in.
There's always this burning thing that listeners have where they want to talk. You know, it's like, oh, I wish I could respond to that or whatever.
I like this.
And so it'd be interesting to do it live. And
before we even started the panel, weeks ago, one thought for like starting a new podcast in 2025 for me was like, it would be cool to experiment with some sort of live element, which I've never really done before.
Yeah.
We're already doing this on YouTube, so I guess we could use like YouTube's live thing. But like I like the idea of a live show. I mean, we probably won't get a lot of listeners actually hanging out live. Maybe we'll get some. That'd be fun if we have a group that returns. So let me understand what you're saying. So it would be like we have like sort of a normal episode, just you and me talking about whatever topic for the current week for however long portion of the episode. And then there's like a segment near the end or like the second half of the episode, which is like, okay, you've been tuning in. What, like, got anything to add on this?
That's right. Like we go, okay, let's go to the panel. And it could just be us reading out comments that people have left as we've been talking. It could be actually sending somebody an invite link and saying, okay, well, just jump on and chat with us right now. If you're, if I used to do this quite a bit when I was live streaming a lot, somebody would show up like Jack McDade would show up in the comments, and I would just like DM him while I was live streaming and go, hey, do you want to just jump on? And then he'd jump on. And so, I think
I like where that's going. One thing that it might miss out on is people who want to insert comments, but they listen to it later. So then I guess we would probably get into a loop where it's like the following week we're going to do a little bit of like mailbag or catch up.
Yeah, we could do some mailbag. Like we've had people send stuff in that we haven't really responded to that I think would be interesting. We've had people comment on episodes on social media and email us. We haven't really been following up on that. So this is a reconfiguration. The idea is to reconfigure it so that the panel...
So that we can still call it the panel.
Is the audience. Like, they're on the panel. It's kind of like on a talk show, like Norm Macdonald or Mark Maron. They might get interviewed, and then David Letterman would say, hey, do you want to stay on panel? And then they would just kind of listen to the next interview the whole time, but then they'd be able to come in at the very end and have their take or whatever.
I like this format, dude, because I think number one, this gets back to what I think you and I were probably both excited about when we started this, which was like, hey, we have all these big topics that we want to be covering on podcasts.
Yeah.
And this new show could be the venue for that.
That's right.
And I feel like the last few weeks of trying to get guests on, it became more about like, who can we wrangle last minute? And we got away from like, let's talk about real stuff.
That's right. And it still allows us the freedom to have guests on. We can still do that.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
I think it brings in this interesting element that hasn't really been done yet in a podcast, which is we've got people live that are interacting with us. And at the end of the show, we'll go, hey, here's what people have said. Or maybe if it might make sense to just, if people are commenting live to say, okay, I got to bring in what, Janet's saying right now. And Janet thinks that, Brian, your pricing sucks. And so then we could have a
She's
little, so the panel is out there watching and, chirping away.
It'd be cool if I wouldn't be able to do this, but tweet while we're doing this.
Yeah, well,
I
mean, in the old days when I was live streaming, I'd use Restream and it would simulcast everything to Twitter, YouTube, and
there's probably an AI or soon to be an AI version of that. It's AI is listening to our live show and is able to push out updates.
Yes, yeah. But people can comment on any platform they're listening on. We could put it live anywhere we want,
Yeah, I think that's I love this whole direction, but I also think that it'll probably take some
massaging
reps. Well, some reps for us to keep it interesting on air. We can't let that devolve into lots of time of us just sort of scrolling through. Random,
yeah.
Bad radio.
Yeah, I think I could do it. I've got quite a bit of practice doing it live. I mean, if we really needed to, we could get somebody like our editor, Chris Enns, to actually just live produce the show too. That might be interesting. Have him feeding us stuff. I've seen some people do that as well. They'll have the whole episode and then the producer will come on and say, okay, we've got some questions from the audience or some comments. And
I'm down to just, try it next time or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, this time I guess it'll just be a normal episode, you and me, but
so let's tell the listener
at least MVP this thing and
next. So we're going to publish this hopefully tomorrow, which is May 30th. So let's just say next Thursday, June 5th, we're going to try to do this 12:15 p.m. Pacific. What is that?
Okay.
What is that your time?
3:15.
3:15. We'll try it out.
Yeah. I'm psyched.
Cool. So
all right, I mean, we talked about all of my stuff last time. Let's get into your side of things this week.
I booked a last-minute ticket to London, UK, to go to the podcast show. The reason I decided to do that is because it feels like the tectonic plates of the podcast industry are moving. And I wanted to be in the mix. I knew there was going to be a bunch of important discussions that happened there. There was some things I didn't realize were going to happen that ended up being incredibly important.
Let me just quick pause, set the stage. So this event in London.
Yeah.
What is it? How big is it?
It's the European Business of Podcasting Conference. It's been going on for 4 or 5 years. Always happens in the same location in London. It's 2 days. I think they said there was 10,000 people total.
Oh, damn.
That seems
huge.
Really big, but
I don't even know what that's like. I've only been to microcomps where it's 200 people.
Now I've got to do some Googling live here. Yeah, 10,000 people attended in 2024.
That's a small city. Okay.
It's a really interesting setup. So in the middle, you can just imagine a giant exhibitor bazaar. There's just a bunch of booths. There's a bunch of picnic tables set up for meetings. It's loud. There's lots of noise and people moving around.
And this is all about podcasting?
Yeah, business of podcasting. Industry? So the booths would have been, in the past, Spotify's had a big booth, but now they've actually, interestingly enough, they did a big splash at these events where they signed up a massive booth, but now they just rent a private lounge where you can book meetings with their people.
Interesting.
But there's still, anyone that's making a big play in podcasting, Amazon, iHeart, Disney Interactive. They'll all have booths. And then there'll also be podcast production agencies, branded podcast production houses, consumer podcast networks like Wondery, people making lots of microphones and equipment and all sorts of folks there.
Interesting.
The reason people in the podcast industry go is it's the place for us to meet with all of our platform partners, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and to a lesser extent, Amazon, but then like all the whole Pocket Casts team is there as well. There's also, for me, I've been really involved in this podcast standards project, which is made up of all of the hosting providers that are privately owned. So basically everybody except for Spotify for creators. And then as many of the independent listening apps as we can get. And we are trying to innovate and improve the open standard, RSS, for creators and listeners, so we can compete with some of these closed platforms. So we're trying to make the open podcast ecosystem more competitive against these recent entrants like Spotify and YouTube, and to a lesser extent, Amazon Music and everybody else.
Okay. So give me your current take on, like, it seems like you're seeing a big shift, or you're predicting a big shift, and in the industry, but also like, how does that impact you and Transistor?
So Transistor's growth has been up the last year. Month over month, we're getting way more trials than we were the previous year. So right now, things are okay. Things are better, actually. Some of this, I think, is because it could be because of a lot of reasons. It could be because there's just more people, more top of funnel kind of awareness about podcasts. And some of that is being driven by people who want to start a podcast on YouTube, or people who want to start a podcast on TikTok or Instagram. That a lot of people consider, for example, Reels on Instagram, where people are talking into a microphone, a podcast. When I was in Chicago for the other podcast conference, every Uber I got into, I would ask them if they, consume podcasts. And then my second question would be, how do you consume them? And, one guy said, oh yeah. And I said, well, where do you listen, or how do you listen? This is the interesting part now. When you ask that question, if you ask our generation, people know right away. Oh, Overcast, Pocket Cast, whatever.
Actually, before that, I'm curious about the first question. Like, overall, is there 50% of people who say yes, they listen to podcasts? Is it more than that?
Almost everybody I ask, like in an Uber or something, is saying yes. There is some selection bias here. People who are in Ubers are, have a interesting use case.
They're in the car a lot.
And they're in the car a lot, but they're also parked a lot as well, I think, waiting for their next ride or whatever. But anyway, I asked this one guy, hey, how do you listen to podcasts? And he goes, in some ways he's like, I wonder what, he's like trying to figure out what I mean. And I go like, are you listening on Spotify? And he goes, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. That's where I'm. And he's like, yeah, I'm listening to all these.
Like when you say podcast, his mind goes to YouTube,
yeah, because
Instagram,
he
and TikTok.
Equates that with, he's trying to get into the fashion business. And so he's consuming all of this content that
it's almost like, I could see that. I guess it's like the normies, if you will.
Yeah.
When you say podcast, their mind is thinking like any digital content that they might be consuming on anywhere.
Digital content that feels like they're learning something or engaging with somebody in this kind of dynamic where there's a host and there's a microphone, and it's different than, fictional television. It's different than Mr. Beast.
I think that there is, I could see where this is going, because it's like, I think podcasts as we know them, as like the techie podcast people, we know them as like, okay, that's a show that I'm going to go seek out, and I'm going to press subscribe, and now I can literally download their audio episodes onto my device. Like, there's a lot of work for me to go decide to subscribe to somebody's podcast show, right?
Yeah.
It's a very it's like a very intentional act and that's what actually makes podcasts so difficult to grow, is like to convince people to download them, right?
Yeah.
But I think what the normies are probably, it's like if you remove all that friction,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this stuff just showed up in my feed and I found it interesting, so I clicked it.
Yes. And they're distinguishing it in their minds. It's like, right next to the quote unquote podcast reel they're watching, where, this guy's watching somebody talk about the fashion business and he's learning and he's like, oh, this is so great. I'm getting what I want from this person. In the same way that you and I might have listened to a bootstrapper podcast to get inspiration or knowledge. The next reel might be somebody on a beach or somebody wiping out on a BMX or, so, but he still considers that content podcasting content.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the most interesting findings I've been rolling over in my head lately is I have this new kind of universal theory about podcasting, which is our generation. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 42.
42. Okay, so I'm 45. Our generation came into podcasts through iTunes. So our first experience with podcasts was very likely downloading them onto our desktop in iTunes and then syncing them with an iPod. Did you ever do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Wires.
Now, also interesting, as a lot of people don't realize, but back then, if you look at the iTunes store, and the iTunes store had everything. It was where you went and bought your music, where you went and bought your movies, and then there was a podcast store, and the podcast store had two big categories which you could switch to on the top of the screen: audio and video. There was audio podcasts and video podcasts.
Yeah.
And so I was, downloading Leo Laporte, This Week in Tech. I was downloading that to my iPod Classic and watching it on the bus on my way to work.
Yeah.
I was also downloading...
video podcasts were sort of a thing that never really took off, but YouTube obviously did. Basically,
I think it did take off in the sense that some of these shows were massive and had big production budgets in the same way that YouTube shows have now. I think that context is important because I think everybody now thinks that, video podcasts just showed up on YouTube and YouTube has owned it. No. And you can still watch video podcasts on Apple Podcasts today, but they've hidden it. So they went very audio first. Anyway, so we came of age with iTunes. And then there was a subsequent thing that happened, which was the app explosion on the iPhone. And so, we went from iTunes to Apple Podcasts on our iPhones, but then simultaneously, there was this whole independent app explosion where people were looking at new apps. There's like every week you're saying, what's new on the App Store? There's all these really creative independent developers that were making these beautiful app experiences. And that's where Overcast came out and Pocket Casts and Castro and all these independent apps. That's our generation.
Now, okay, let me pause you there because I still think that today, okay, so if you take the whole world and then you slice it into the people who listen to actual podcasts,
yes,
like subscribe and download the audio to their device and listen like we do to podcasts. Let's say that's like 50% of the world.
Yeah.
Within the podcasting listener base, I have to think that like 90% plus are using the Apple Podcasts app. And then only the even today in 2025, like I think I used Pocket Cast today. I used to use Downcast. You have to be you have to be both a super consumer of podcasts and pretty tech and web savvy to go seek out an alternative podcast player like a Pocket Cast or a Downcast or a Overcast or one of these.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a very small subset, I think, even today.
Okay, so let me...
And you would know this better than me, but that'd be my
I
guess.
just was able to get a bunch of data from Coleman Insights, who along with Amplify do the biggest consumer research study of podcast consumers in the world. And they do this every year. They've been doing it, I think, for 10 years now, something like that. It's very, very interesting. So I would call our group legacy listeners. Legacy listeners are basically 40 to 55. Today, we still drive most of the downloads. A lot of the legacy listening is driven by our age group.
Yep.
Our age group is also, right now, we're essentially the new boomers. We are the wealthy employed professionals who have a high household income. And the reason that podcast advertising rates have typically been so high is we are this very valuable cohort of consumers.
And you can see it in the ads that we hear on podcasts.
Yes.
Like the types of products, right? Like, and this goes across all podcasts. Like I listen to the Mets pod almost every week about the New York Mets. Like they're advertising like Cadillacs.
Yes.
Or you hear a ton of ads for like Indeed because you are in the workforce or you're maybe in the hiring like workforce or a business owner or a manager. You see a lot of this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. And so this legacy listener group is also actually, by the way, the group that's running the podcast industry. And so if you pull our team, the Transistor team, we're almost all of our in our 40s, except for, we're older, basically. Mm-hmm. We would all say, oh, yeah, who watches a podcast? Like we're listening on Overcast and Pocket Casts and Apple Podcasts. But that's because we're in this boomer legacy listener group.
We got to get into the YouTube side of this because I know this is where you're going though.
And if you look at, Google most popular podcast apps on Transistor, the majority of the downloads on Transistor is Apple Podcasts, more than Spotify even. And I think it's because this age group is listening to the most podcasts. They've been doing it for a long time. Maybe the typical consumer might listen to one podcast a month. This group is listening to maybe 2 or 3 shows a day. Like they are enthusiastic listeners, consumers of podcasts. They're doing it on legacy apps like Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts and Overcast, maybe Spotify if they're more in the millennial age group. Here's what the data is showing. First of all, YouTube, in terms of people that say, I use YouTube most often for consuming podcasts, YouTube is killing it in every age group. Mm-hmm. So young people, 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64. We're seeing percentages like 44% for young people. In that next group, 25 to 34, 45%. And the 35 to 44 group, it's 38%.
About YouTube, I could totally see that. And okay, so for me as a longtime, multi-decade podcast consumer, I'm one of these legacy listeners, high volume of podcasts that I listen to.
Yeah,
it's always been up until recently, it has been 100% through a Pocket Casts or a Downcast, or it used to be Apple Podcasts. Only in the last 2 years or so that podcast listening has expanded out into YouTube for me. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that it's interesting. And YouTube is like my it's like how I watch TV at home. If I'm not watching like Netflix or Apple TV or something, I'm watching YouTube on my couch at home.
Me as
the
well.
TV set. And I'd say the majority of the content that I pull up at night, like 10, 11 p.m. at night, I'm just hanging out, just kind of relaxing. I'm watching a podcast on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting how the shows that I watched then are not the shows that I listen to during the day. Mm-hmm. It's like a different set of shows.
Yeah.
That I just find more interesting to watch than to listen to.
Yes.
But they are but it's like people at microphones on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And in a lot of ways I'm similar. So here's I'm working on this piece right now. And if you look at, can I zoom this in? Open. So if you look at YouTube's killing it in every age group, right? Then you look at Spotify. Spotify has been doing good with the younger age group. The younger age group, it's got pretty good pretty big numbers. But the Spotify number goes down as you go older.
On that with Spotify, I would assume that our age group still totally identifies Spotify as the place for music and not the place for
Yes.
podcasts. I happen to use Apple Music these days, but I was a long time Spotify subscriber, and even then, like I sort of like refused to listen to podcasts there because like that's where I go when I don't want podcasts.
That's
when
right.
I want music instead, you know.
And so, but this is the interesting one to me. Apple Podcasts. So when you include YouTube, you know, Apple Podcasts share, as in what do you use most often to consume podcasts? It's highest in the 45 to 54 age group. It's around 21%. Goes down to 16% for those 25 to 44, 9% for 18 to 24. And this is kind of a demographic cliff that I'm talking about. Traditional podcast listening right now is under threat. Some folks in the industry have said, well, just wait until these 18 to 24-year-olds graduate, they'll get a job, they'll be in the car, then
they're
they'll
not just going to like change their behavior.
But that's that's exactly it. That's why I talked about it's so important to understand that we are defined by the habits we were trained on when we were younger.
Right. Yes.
And so we were trained on iTunes, but this younger group is being trained on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And just like my Uber driver, it's no different for him to go plug his phone into his car and to listen to YouTube while he's driving. It's for him, it's not a big deal.
If you think
seamless
about it, it makes so much sense. Like I didn't even, I think again, it comes back to that, like YouTube completely removes all friction to discovery of content.
Yeah.
I didn't even, I said like 2 years ago, I started watching podcasts on the television through YouTube.
Yep.
That wasn't even a conscious decision.
Yeah.
I didn't say like, oh, I'm going to start making my habits change and I'm going to go start listening to some podcasts. No, like just stuff that I was interested in started showing up for me.
Yes.
And I clicked on it and that's what happened. Like it's just, and I think that's what happens for everyone. Like it is just the feed. The feed is so personalized and so smart, the algorithm, that it, and you know, the algorithm works. Like,
yes.
And that's like with podcasts, like going to press subscribe on mostly technical podcasts. Like I happen to know those guys. So that's what led me to go seek it out and press subscribe. And that's a really high friction activity to do that. You know?
Yes. So that's kind of the background. Now, again, it's hard to tell what will happen, right? How does this net out for Transistor over the next 5 to 10 years? Right now, my guess is there's a lot of, well, one thing is this, if the 45 to 54-year-olds are the new boomers, you know, that's my generation, there's still a lot of us. We still have a lot of money. We're in our prime earning years. A lot of those people want to start podcasts. So, you know, we've probably got another 5-10 years just with that group. Even they're going to keep wanting to start podcasts. But I am worried about this younger group.
So let me poke holes in the logic that you're saying.
Yeah.
Because Transistor is a hosting company, right? It's not like because are you saying that like there's like if you're seeing a drop off in the people who listen to podcasts through apps that would require their content to be hosted on a Transistor, then are you saying the next logical conclusion is that there are going to be fewer and fewer podcasts publishing and needing to host their content?
I think it's the CEO's job to be looking out at what's coming and to be wondering what are the threats to my business. And one of the threats is that if this younger generation is being trained on YouTube, and YouTube is everything. It is the hosting provider. It is the analytics provider. It is the main distribution platform. It is the main consumption. It's where people consume it. It's the advertising network. It's everything. And when people say, I'm going to create a podcast, and they just go straight to YouTube That is a big threat for Transistor.
That's what I'm asking. Like, so you think that the trend is going to be that like all new podcasters who and maybe even existing podcasters, they're just going to start to forego hosting their podcast anywhere else except for YouTube. Like to start a podcast, it'll just mean like all I need to do is put it on YouTube, and I don't care about hosting it on my own website or distributing it through Apple Podcasts or through.
Yes. That's a possibility. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying that's one of my concerns. And it's something I'm thinking about. There's another part of me that is the ideological part of me is concerned because a large centralized platform like YouTube, I think if it took over the open web, the open ecosystem, the open way of doing things, I think we would lose a lot as a culture. I also think I'm writing this other paper right now on, I've done all this research on how open source and open protocols tend to spread out wealth. So if you think about the WordPress ecosystem has generated enormous amounts of wealth for independent businesses. There's the freelancers, there's the theme designers, there's the plugin people, there's the hosting providers. Yeah. Now, there are big winners in that ecosystem, like WP Engine, but even the big winners are nowhere near like YouTube scale. The big winners have, good revenue, but overall, the wealth is spread out much more than you would have with a large, centralized vertical platform like YouTube or Facebook. In those cases, most of the wealth just goes to the people at the top. And there's another trend that I'm noticing with my kids that I think is relevant here. I know this is a lot, but just let me try to get it out and then you can.
Yeah.
Here's one reason I'm hopeful is when I watch my kids and their friends, and even people our age, this is happening in every generation. Increasingly, people are realizing they are addicted to their phones. So my son started using YouTube in the browser because it was the only way he could block YouTube Shorts. Now in the app, if you open up your app right now, for a lot of the times, YouTube Shorts will be at the top of your screen. Why is that? Because they know it drives engagement, it drives addiction.
I find them annoying too. I scroll past them.
And it's hard to scroll by them for most people.
I think there are two. Okay, sorry, go on.
So I'm seeing an opportunity here. The pendulum often swings back. The counterculture to disco was punk rock. The counterculture to streaming has been vinyl records. And I do think there is a growing counterculture of people who are fed up with these centralized platforms, who are really like Instagram and Facebook especially have destroyed teenage culture. They've led to all sorts of negative effects on self-esteem, and there's a lot of problems. Kids are realizing this. If you talk to them, they're like, this is a massive problem. And podcasting, especially audio first podcasting, so I think video is going to be part of the solution, but audio first podcasting is AirPods in, outside for a walk, AirPods in, doing some chores, AirPods in, or not AirPods in, but CarPlay on, going for a drive. It is away from your device. You're not looking at your screen. You're not addicted in the same way. And I think there's an opportunity here. I think people will be looking for calm alternatives that don't.
I think there are multiple threads here.
Yeah.
Just on the ground level for you and Transistor, getting away from the culture and society and
but you got to look at all that. All that stuff feeds into it.
I get it. I agree with a lot of it, but I disagree with some of it. Okay, but just in terms of like two guys talking about our businesses, and especially you in Transistor being a bootstrapped, I think you're one of the leaders in the podcasting industry, but you're not like one of these like huge like VC backed companies, right? Like,
yes.
you're doing your thing in your corner of the market, and that thing is going really well. You said you grew this year from last year.
We've never had a down month ever.
Yeah. So like it just on that level alone, just keep doing what you're doing, man. You got a great product, great customer base. It's going to keep growing. You're fine. I don't think that there's any strategic business case to be made that like any major changes need to be made. Maybe other than the only opportunity for you in terms of like product and like product market stuff might be to maybe start to like integrate more with YouTube. I know you already do some stuff. I don't know, but I just don't see that the market for wanting to host your podcast on a transistor. I just don't see that going away anytime soon. And you've got a great business on your hands. Don't mess with it. Okay, like the other.
By the way, I to push back on that, I actually think this is something that more bootstrapped founders should be thinking about. I think this is a potential problem for PHP and Laravel. I think there's a potential problem for Rails. The pipeline problem is a real problem because the only way that products continue to grow is if a new generation graduates into adulthood, for most of us, graduates into adulthood and starts and becomes our customers. And if we're over-relying on a particular demographic, that's where you do face a massive threat. This happened in the nonprofit industry. A lot of nonprofits were incredibly reliant on actual boomers as donors. And what they weren't paying attention to was the data that was showing that Gen X and millennials and Gen Z were not donating to those causes at the same rate. And it decimated those nonprofits. They didn't realize that this boomer generation, they start to retire and they start to leave this earth. And the only way that you can get new customers is you have to be looking at that next generation. And this is a risk for I look around.
I actually see a bigger opportunity for you right now. And that is because you were just talking about like, okay, there's this like potential or growing counterculture that is still going to embrace the old, like the traditional podcasting stuff. I actually think it's something else. I think that the opportunity is a little bit different. Yesterday I was listening to Rand Fishkin. He was a guest on what's his podcast, like Talking Too Loud, the Wistia guy.
Okay.
He had him on. It was a great conversation. Like they just published it this week. And Rand has been talking about this for a couple of years, and I'm starting to hear this term float around more and more lately. No-click marketing or zero-click marketing, zero-click traffic.
Yeah.
And the base idea from that argument is like, and it's true. Like, look, traffic from Google is decreasing for everyone across the board.
I don't think it's decreasing for us.
I mean, I think that could be true, but like, look, like SEO traffic. Like I was watching CNBC last night. Like they're talking about zero-click traffic. Like the economy of blue links showing up in Google and driving traffic to small businesses, that is going down at the macro level across the board because all of that search volume is being eaten up by Google itself. People are getting their answers directly in Google without needing to click a link to go to your website or my website, right?
I can see that affecting some things, but if they're going to buy a product, they eventually have to land up on my website.
Yeah. But in general, like there are so many businesses that have always relied on SEO only.
Yes.
So
I mean, if you're a content-based business or an affiliate-based business, I can see that being a big concern.
The big idea that Rand was really pushing heavily in this conversation this week, and he has been saying this. Rand Fishkin is a guy who we were talking about, like people that we really trust and learn from, and he's a guy that I always kind of look to for like wisdom on marketing strategy and where is the current state of play in marketing. For years he did those whiteboard video sessions on explaining how SEO works and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That has shifted. And what he's pushing is this idea of influencer. It
Yeah.
is all about the influencer, right? And he's not even necessarily saying that every single person needs to become an influencer, but if you're a business owner, you need to be thinking about like, who are the influencers, or what are the platforms or communities or places
Mm-hmm.
that are going to influence your customers to go hear about through word of mouth, to go directly to Transistor, because they're not going to go through the front door that is Google anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Some will, of course, but like that trend line is going down.
Mm-hmm.
I was on CNBC last night. I was watching the CEO of Cloudflare.
Yeah.
Was on with Andrew Ross Sorkin, right? He was saying that the guy from Cloudflare, he had some stat. Oh, what was it? It was something like, for every page that Google indexes, it used to be like for every 2 pages on the internet that Google indexes, it sends like a click or a visitor, or like a million visitors per something like that. Like that ratio is now up to like for every 6 pages that they index there. Like, so like the overall number of traffic coming through the Google front door is just decreasing across the board. And it's like obvious. Half of it is because of Google's sponsored links, and the other half is because half of the page is Google's AI answers, right?
Yeah.
Or people are just going to ChatGPT, or people are just not even if they're not even using AI, they're just not trusting Google search results anymore, because it's like all gamed, it's all SEO, it's all sponsored. So they're going to the Reddits, they're going to their friends, they're going to these communities, they're going to YouTube. Oh, I trust that person's opinion on YouTube.
Yeah.
They mentioned this product. Okay, now let me go type in transistor.fm.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. I agree. I think that will be.
And that, I think, is the opportunity for a company like yours, because like for me, I'm a person who I'm thinking about like where do I invest my time and energy and budget and resources on the marketing side of things. And I made the decision about a year ago that like, given my situation and what I have in front of me, like I think that should be YouTube, because like just creating videos, like that is the easiest path to getting in front of new people to discover my products. And it's sort of working. Like the first 20 customers on Instrumental Components are total strangers who discovered it through the YouTube algorithm just in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, and that is the only thing, like, and Clarity Flow does get the majority of its customers through Google, but that is decreasing just in the last couple of months. And it's partly due to competition. It's partly due to just Google traffic in general decreasing, but we're still getting about the same number of new customers every month. It's just that like our word of mouth is starting to kick in a little bit more now.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I think that the opportunity in general for everyone, but especially for a company like yours, is like if those advertising dollars, if those marketing dollars or resources, whether you're a bootstrap company or a more established company, if those need to go into influence marketing, influence-based marketing, and less from the pay-per-click and less from the investing in SEO, that means investing in podcasting or investing in like creating content, being a person, like a human that is publishing content especially on video on YouTube. So like being in that economy is a good place to be if you're a transistor, in my opinion.
Yeah. And maybe just on the, I want to maybe, I think we're gonna have to close here. I'm sorry, we didn't talk about you, but
no, we don't have to.
I want to talk about what we're strategizing about doing for video.
Yeah.
And this is early. So my new thought that what we might experiment with is someone could upload their video to Transistor. The costs for this, by the way, are much more complicated and expensive. So we got to figure out some things. They would upload their video to Transistor. We would syndicate that to YouTube and to Spotify video. And we would consume their analytics APIs. YouTube will give it to us. Spotify, we're working on it. back into Transistor. So now you have your audio listening analytics in Transistor and your YouTube and Spotify video analytics in Transistor. At the same time, we want to offer people an open alternative. And so right now, we're proposing a new spec, which is a podcast feed can have an alternate enclosure URL, which would be a streaming video URL. The problem right now with like the old way of doing video is that if you download those video files on the RSS feed to your device, it's too big. Yeah. So using HLS, we would do streaming video. Pocket Cast is going to support this. A lot of other independent apps are going to support this. And we're working with Apple to try to get them to support it. Now, Apple, this is difficult, but I think there's a big play for Apple here. One, they have premium podcast subscriptions, and video content makes for great premium content. So if you want to pay, but even more so, they have this Apple TV ecosystem. And right now, I have an Apple TV set-top box. I'm using that to go to not Apple TV Plus, which I'm a subscriber to, not anything else. I'm using it to go to YouTube.
Same.
Apple is losing, but I'm watching the same.
I feel like that's been the story with Apple for so many years in podcasting and content in general. Like they're not getting it.
This is the place for them to win because I'm watching the same content. I used to go home after listening to a podcast on my way home. I would turn on my iMac. There was a remote that you could pair with your iMac, and I would watch video podcasts at home the same way I'm watching video on YouTube now. Apple could make this.
I hear what you're saying, but I wonder, like, what is
Citizen?
There are a few podcasts where I'm listening to it on like through Pocket Casts, and then I know that they also published this one to YouTube, and I'll go into the show notes and I'll just click the link because I want to hear the rest of this interview, but watch them instead of listen to them, and like that happens from time to time with me.
Yeah.
So I wonder what you're proposing here, like how would it be better or different than,
because
like,
now you'd be able.
What's the argument for a podcaster who says like, well, I published to YouTube, why don't I just put my YouTube link in my show notes?
Well, first of all, podcasters are already telling us that they want to publish everywhere. So we've done multiple surveys of our creators, and when we ask them where they want to publish and we give them options, they say, I just want to publish it everywhere. Like whatever app takes video, I want my podcast to be on video in those apps. The advantage now with Pocket Cast is that you could seamlessly switch between the audio version and the video version. So if you're like, oh, I want to see what they look like in this scenario, or now I'm home, I want to switch to video, you could switch to video and watch it as a video at that point. The same way you can do, I mean, again, you could do this on a lot of different podcast apps for a long time. You can seamlessly switch between the audio and video version, Spotify, YouTube Music. A lot of people offer this now. I think the advantage for Apple, so one interesting thing about the open ecosystem is we've always depended on bigger platforms. Like Apple has been a cornerstone of the open podcasting ecosystem. They want to win in content. They're investing billions of dollars into the Apple TV ecosystem. And so if I'm going home and I'm watching stuff on YouTube, they're missing out on all that stuff. But if I go home and I watch a podcast about Severance on Apple Video Podcasts, at the end of that, they can recommend, oh, you like Severance? You might like Silo. You might like some other shows. They can integrate it into their ecosystem. The reason Netflix and YouTube and all of these big platforms are getting into video podcasts is because they want cheap TV content. Yeah. And they want things that will parlay into other parts of their business. Well, Apple wants that too. And so they have the marketing dollars and the platform distribution. You know, it's like, I don't know what their install base is, but it's like 60 million or 80 million. Now Apple TV is built into a lot of smart TVs.
Yeah.
Use
I
that
really
distribution.
Don't know. Like, this is maybe another topic for another day, but I think this year, the last couple of months with Apple in general, it's been really interesting to see them I don't know how closely you follow like the Apple specific news
Mm-hmm.
with their company and their product lines, but they are under fire. People are calling for Tim Cook
Mm-hmm.
to wrap it up. And like what you're describing, I think the whole podcasting ecosystem with Apple is like a perfect example of like they're not getting it. Like and you see that like they clearly missed the ball with AI. The Vision Pro was a flop.
Yeah.
Like, and even like Macs and like there are things that are becoming more and more frustrating with like the devices and the OS systems and like I don't know, like we're coming to the end of something, of like the end of an era, like the culture at Apple. Like,
Here's why I'm hopeful. Here's why I'm hopeful.
I mean, I love that. I mean, I'm an Apple fanboy throughout, but there's a change going on here, and like, I don't know, like it's hard to see them being like the leading player in.
I agree. It's
you know?
It's a long shot, but here's why I'm hopeful. One of the things that happened in London is that Apple, for the first time, invited all of the hosting providers to their head office in London, which employs thousands of people. I think it's like 3,500 people work there or something. So they got us in, they got us all security clearance. We all got Apple badges, got taken in, and they did a whole event just for podcast hosting providers where they reiterated, this is now the 20-year anniversary of podcasting. We are the home of podcasts. We are committed to the open ecosystem. We are so happy for all the work you've done lately we've done a lot of work for Apple Premium subscriptions. We just launched direct submission to Apple Podcasts. I think they are increasing, like they're hiring more people, they're expanding more in Apple Pod, investing more resources into it. And they seem to be very focused on their legacy in podcasting.
Interesting.
And
I
then
can see that.
at the so they had this big reception for us. They were open. They had the head of Apple Podcasts there. They had all the product people. They had creator partners, all these people. And they're just saying, let's hear what you got to say. Now, I've always had a relationship with people there, and I send them ideas all the time. But this was like an official event.
Mm-hmm.
Then, for the first time ever, I think this is the first time this has ever happened. Apple gave a keynote talk at a conference for Apple Podcasts. So Apple has a lot of rules and guidelines. Basically, nobody at Apple speaks at conferences. Try to think of a single conference that's not an Apple conference.
They only do their own events.
They only do their own events.
Yeah.
This may be the first time this has ever happened, besides Steve Jobs or Tim Cook. But Apple did a keynote talk at the podcast show, and the message was the same thing. Podcasting is celebrating 20 years. Apple is the home of podcasting. Open by design is their new slogan. So, and they have basically a screenshot of XML. It's like an RSS feed, XML. And then they showed another slide, which was not just open by design in terms of RSS, but open by design in terms of enabling this ecosystem of independent apps. And then they showed Overcast, Pocket Cast, Castro. I think they're gearing up for something bigger. Now, it's a long shot. This is like, my goal is to keep moving the ball forward in the open ecosystem because I'm passionate about it.
I really think that what I think you touched on it earlier, and it's exactly what was firing me up when I was doing Ripple.fm last year. Just sort of a project that really went nowhere, but it's something that I still think I can't believe that like this doesn't exist to me. That the fact that in the open ecosystem, there is a social network sitting right there that nobody has created through podcasts.
Yeah.
Like it's literally like the connections are already there. Somebody just needs to like have the platform to connect it. And honestly, I think that Transistor is like, you're in the perfect position to do something like that. Like, it's insane to me that like I listen to, let's say 20 podcasts pretty regularly. Mm-hmm. How am I not easily able to connect with the other listeners of the same podcasts that I like to listen to? Mm-hmm. Like the people who are listening to us, they are very much like each other. Yeah. They probably listen to a lot of the same sets of podcasts. They probably do a lot of the same things for a living, probably around the same age. Like there should be a natural social network. And I don't mean that, like, I don't mean each individual podcast creating their own community. That happens. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
But there should be a platform level community. And like, I mean, I already built part of this where it's like, I think it's even more helpful if you're in the position of being a podcast host.
Yeah.
Because you already have the network sort of set up. But there is an like Apple actually offers an open API to, you could search for any podcast and say like these are my favorites. And so I just think that like there's something there. Like if you're thinking about like areas to sort of step into, to lean into the open ecosystem and to have some sort of like growth lever for Transistor, I really think it's like human community, human connection between podcast listeners and hosts and like the natural networks that already exist just based on like which things people are subscribed to and listen to regularly. Like, and that's also an area that YouTube is just focused on their content and their algorithm, right? And it's always going to be huge. It's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We know that. Apple is always just going to be focused on like, they want podcasts to thrive and they want Apple TV, but really what they want to do is sell more and more iPhone and Macs. The bootstrapped podcast host company like Transistor, like I think there's either a community play or a content play, like helping people create content, helping people connect and listen. And like, and that could also be a play. Like, again, we were talking about like, this is like 0-click marketing. The way to do that is through influencer. The way to do that is through, there is going to be a growing hunger for like human led word of mouth, like away from the AI slop and the automated results that you see in Google and the stuff that ChatGPT spits back. I want to talk to my humans. I want to talk to my people. I want to be like, where am I going to go for recommendations? I'm going to go into the private Slack groups that I'm in.
This is why investing in the open ecosystem and collaborating and coordinating with other providers and listening apps is so exciting to me. Because if we wait for Apple to do that, they're not going to do it, or they're going to do it wrong. You're going to have to sign in with an Apple ID or some sort of bullshit. But
that it's also not like their incentive. Like they don't want to be a social network.
That's right. But you could imagine an open protocol called TalkBack, where if somebody double clicks on their AirPods, they're listening to a podcast and they like, oh man, they double click on their AirPods and they can just quickly record something and say, hey guys, was just listening to you. I think Brian's right. Justin, get your head out of the clouds. Okay, see ya. Done. That could get sent to the hosting provider as an audio clip. That's possible in the open ecosystem. And it would work on
that.
It would work on every, it could work on every podcast app. You could have multiple ways of implementing that. It gives listeners a way of interacting with the host. It gives creators more content than you just bring all those clips back in. Like there's.
I think also like that on the creative side is another opportunity, right? Like yes, like everyone who creates content, they do want to distribute it to all the platforms. That's true. People have been talking about repurpose your content. Like they've been talking about that for years, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants to do it. Everyone does a half-assed job at it. In reality, we're only actually personally active on 1 or 2, maybe 3 networks, right? And then we hope that people find us on the other ones. But the way to do that really well, and the high level creators, they have a whole creative team. Like if you look at like Gary Vee or someone like somebody just follows him around with a camera, and then he has a whole team who's going to cut it up into, this is the YouTube version of his content. This is the TikTok version of his content. And it's all different, right? Jay Klaus, we've had on this show, like he does a really good job he does generally a regular podcast interview, but his YouTube version is quite different. It's much more optimized, much more engaging for the YouTube platform. Like it's actually different content than what you would hear on the audio version. But that is way too much work for a typical solo podcaster, So like you're saying with Transistor, like that's another area where it's like, if you can make it easier to not just repurpose and distribute everywhere, but like help me actually like cut up the version for YouTube and the version for LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Or take listener stuff and just like automatically like stitch it together into something that I can post or automatically post for me, in like an optimized version for whatever platform.
Yeah.
That's also kind of.
This is why I'm excited about the alternate enclosure tag for RSS, is that you can still have your audio episode first, but alternate enclosures could include the streaming video version. It could also include a too long didn't listen version, which is 3 minutes long. So somebody could come to that episode and go, you know what, this, like, we've already been recording for an hour and 11 minutes. Someone could say, just give me the too long didn't listen version. And on the hosting side, that could be generated with AI. Like, we could just automatically shorten it, still using our voices, but just give us the 3-minute version of this 1 hour and 12-minute conversation. All of that's possible. And yeah, so those are some of the things I'm thinking about. I think we should wind it down here. But if people out there in the panel have responses to this, there are links in our show notes for recording an audio or video response through Clarity Flow. You can leave a reply on Bluesky, and that will automatically show up in the show notes as a comment. You can email us. I'd love to hear what you think about both our conversation, the meta conversation at the beginning, and what I feel like I just communicated like 10% of what I experienced in London. Like, I had so many other things. I met with Simon Hamp, the guy that made native PHP. There's all sorts of other thoughts floating around in my head, but
it's a lot, man. Like, I really think it's something that we'll probably continue to dig into. So was it June 5th is going to be our next episode, and we're going to try to do that live?
That's right. Although, yeah, because what's today is the 29th. Yeah, so June 5th will be our next recording.
Wait, June? That's a week from today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're going to try to publish this tomorrow.
Okay, sweet. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right, dude.
All right. Thanks for listening to me, man. That was a lot.
That's good. Yeah. I want to see where this goes.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Later, folks.